let's begin wrapping up this semester. You guys have rocked it all semester, and this is the end of it. And so I just want to touch on a few things just to kind of highlight some of those important aspects that I think it's important for you to grasp as you're moving forward in the program. First of all, I'm just going to look back at some high points. I'm not going back through every single thing, obviously, because you have those available to you. You've got your worksheets available. You've got the other things that we've done. So I'm just going to hit some high points and why I think it's important for you to have an in-depth understanding of these concepts so that as you move forward in all of your classes, you can carry these skills and this knowledge with you. First of all, why do we even need to do research? And again, we've talked about this in the beginning, and the book talks about it, and I know students always wonder. Some students love research, the majority of students don't. Everybody wants to be practitioners. We want to help people. We want to go out. We want to do it every day. But it's important that we have an understanding of research, even if we're not going to conduct it. So that we can be good consumers of the research. And especially today in this huge information age when information is coming at us from all directions, we really more than ever need those skills on how to determine what information is good, what information is not good, where the information is coming from, and what the information means. So that's why we need to have these basic understandings of research concepts so that we can be good consumers of research. Not only do we need that for ourselves, but we're going to need that moving forward. You're going to need that moving forward in practice because you're going to spend a great deal of your time trying to re-educate individuals that you work with, your clients, and show them that what they're maybe seeing on the news or they're reading in the Inquirer or on Facebook is not accurate information. So in some senses, you're not only going to be a good consumer of research, you're also going to become a teacher of it as we educate those that we work with. We need to be able to be collaborative in research activities. Again, even if you have no plans to go into any academic research or do any of that, we need to take active participation in evaluating our programs, if nothing else. Otherwise, we're leaving those decisions and those interpretations up to individuals who may not be in our profession. So we need to be active collaborators in our programs. We need to understand the evaluations that are happening, and we need to understand the processes of those evaluations, and if the information that's being collected and being interpreted is good information, and if it's being interpreted correctly, and if it's being applied correctly. Then we need to be able to ultimately generate and disseminate our own evidence that supports our profession and our interventions. And this is the actual carrying out of the research, the actual gathering the data, the actual sharing your findings, so that we can continue to advance our profession and help the vulnerable populations that we work with. The other part of this in research is very much applicable. So while you can go through the book and you can memorize the terms and you can see that, as we've progressed through the semester, you see that that's always not enough. So in engaging in the research and in learning about the research, it also helps you in developing higher level thought processes through learning to understand these concepts of research. It's going to create advanced critical thinking skills for you, problem solving skills, and the ability to transfer knowledge from one setting to another. These are what's called soft skills, if you will. And I read a publication just this week in terms of, I think it was like 75% of employers who were surveyed in 2019 said that they can't find employees that have good critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, or the ability to transfer knowledge and apply it across multiple situations. These are those higher level skills. These are skills that I think research pushes us to develop, maybe more so than some other direct practice situations where you're kind of following a recipe. Cognitive behavioral therapy, you kind of follow a recipe and how to do that. But what we have to do in the real world is we actually have to be able to think critically. We have to be able to problem solve on our feet. And we have to be able to take what we've learned in one area and apply it into another area that may look very differently. And I think research and learning research and engaging in this process helps us do that. These are vital for our clients, they're vital for our society, they're vital for us to be able to keep moving forward. So these are the soft skills I think we get out of engaging in this process of learning about research. At the beginning of the semester, I provided you the model that I use to understand the flow process and how we can use that model to develop these investigations. And again, this is my model that I've developed over the years, and this is the one that I put in there. So I understand the nuances of it because it's something I've developed based on my thought processes, but it's just one way of outlining that process of being able to create a research flow process from conceptualization all the way out to data gathering, interpretation, and then applying it and disseminating the information. You know, as you get a better understanding of the research process, as you get a better understanding of these different concepts, I encourage you to develop your own model. Again, it's also a way that we can really apply in practice. We can adjust some of those processes and apply it in practice. Because even if you're working with one client and you're wondering if your intervention is working with that client, there are things that you can do along that process flow model to determine how well it's happening. So that's the model I use. You're welcome to carry it with you through whatever you do, but hopefully you can tweak it to an understanding of what makes sense for you. You know, early in the semester, we also looked at ethical and cultural considerations, specifically at the ethical considerations when we examined the movie of the Pregnancy Project. And that's one I've used and designed to really get you into that thinking process. So whether it's in practice or whether it's in research, these parallel each other. And taking into consideration the ethical and cultural and heritage aspects of engaging with other human beings is vital no matter what we're doing. So when we learn this in research from the research standpoint, we can then in turn apply it in our practice standpoint. They do parallel each other. So we have to think about in terms of autonomy and respect. Adult individuals have the right to make their own decisions. They have the right to choose their behavior. It doesn't mean there's not consequences for those choices, but we all get to show up and choose however we want to act. Unless we have some form of diminished capacity and we're under guardianship or we're underage, then we actually have some things that maybe we can't do on our own or not allowed to. If we're working with individuals with diminished capacity, we still bring the autonomy and the respect to that and help them to learn to make those decisions. Our clients have the right to participate with us in our program. It's their right. If they choose not to, again, there may be some consequences to it. But as adults, as functioning adults, we all have the right for autonomy and respect and to make our own decisions. That's whether it's in research or that's whether it's in practice. Confidentiality, not telling our business, respecting a client's privacy. All of those things are not only ethical, there are also legal aspects to it. When we talk about critical thinking and we talk about problem solving, we have to think beyond the confidentiality in our day-to-day work and how breaking that could potentially harm any of us on a larger perspective. So that's a very important thing in both research and in our daily practice. Again, it parallels each other. Confidentiality is also something else that you need to respect when you're working with your peers, when you're working with, if you're in a leadership position, you need to gain the trust of those that you're leading by maintaining confidentiality. I kind of grew up with a daddy who told me, you don't tell all your business and you don't tell everything you know. And I've carried that throughout my life, and it's important to develop trust of individuals that they can come and they can share something with you, and they know that you're going to keep it close to your vest and you're not going to share it beyond that. So again, the confidentiality that we learn in research is really no different than the confidentiality and the importance of that we're going to engage in our practice, in our administrative lives, in whatever that looks like. Social justice, this is what our profession is built on. It's built on social justice. We want to ensure that in a research process that we are not overburdening one population to benefit another population. But we also want to do that in our daily practice. We don't want to, we want social justice. Everybody deserves equal opportunity and resources to develop those opportunities. Again, it parallels whether it's research or practice. And again, we always must consider the different cultures and the different ethnic heritages that we're going to be dealing with. We should come at this, no matter whether it's research or practice, from what is considered a cultural humility perspective. And that's an other-oriented perspective. That's being curious about the other individual, being curious about where they come from so that we can get a better understanding of that. Not necessarily cultural competence. I'm not going to be able to be competent in somebody else's culture, but I can have that cultural humility so that I can learn from them and so that I can engage them in what works best for them. In a research standpoint, how do they, what kind of data do they respect the most or do they trust the most? If it's in a Native American traditional culture, they may be more inclined to really respect and trust the narrative type of data, the qualitative type of data. Whereas if it's in a Western society, we're very much quantitative oriented. Count. We want to count everything. We want to generalize it. So understanding where the individuals come, their backgrounds, and where they come from is also important in both research and practice. The old dreaded review of the literature. This is something that we do. We do it throughout our program. We do it in our classes. And, the true reality of it is once you graduate, unless you go into some form of program where you're going to be writing grants, where you're going to be carrying out research, where you're going to be doing presentations or something, you may never write another review of literature from an academic perspective, period. So why is that so important? Well, again, it teaches you a way to search and gather information for evidence purposes. It teaches you a way to discern that information, what's good and what's not good. So we go back to developing those higher level thinking skills, the better problem solving, being able to transfer the knowledge and the critical thinking. That happens when you learn and you engage in the process of doing these literature reviews. It's an activity that helps you build reading comprehension skills. We all can improve our reading comprehension skills because that's necessary for us to be able to communicate, to be able to share our ideas. Those things expand our vocabulary. So that helps us again in our written and verbal communication skills. So while you get the opportunity to engage in looking at a lot of information about topics you're interested in, these soft skills are developing because of the processes that you're going through. It's not just the end product, it's the processes that you're going through that are more important, I think, than always the end product. And again, it's necessary beyond research, and it's imperative to the day-to-day practice that we can discern information. We know how to find information. We know how to use information and apply it. We know how to be discriminating with that information and not take it at face value if we don't understand how it was collected or where it came from or who provided it. So we're not at the effect of the information, but we then become commanding it and in control of it and how it's implemented and how it's used. So again, while you may never write a true another academic literature review, and you hate APA, I get that, it really is that process. It's that learning process that's so important in this. And the literature review is foundation for research studies. It's something that we have to do, and what you've learned in reading the different articles is they all have some form aspect of a literature review background information. We have to have a foundation to build on to move forward. So you're going to see that a lot, but being able to actually read the information, understand the information, know if it's good quality, those are so much more important than actually just sitting down and even just writing that literature review. But don't get me wrong, the written communication skills, verbal communication skills that are developed through this process continue to propel you forward into that high level of professionalism. You know, there are two overarching paradigms in the research world. One's a quantitative and one's a qualitative approach. And what's really important about this is to get that in-depth understanding of each one of them. Choosing to do quantitative research or choosing to do qualitative research is driven by the level of knowledge we have about the particular subject you're exploring. It's driven by that research question you're attempting to answer, and it's driven by the purpose of your investigation. It's not about personal preference. Oftentimes students will say, I prefer qualitative because I don't like statistics. What I'm going to tell you, and what you're probably going to experience as you move forward, especially in the advanced research part, qualitative is 10 times the work quantitative is. Statistics, numbers, what we think is math tend to scare us, but really the software programs do the math for us now. We just have to know which statistical test to apply based on which variables and what we're looking at. So it's not about preference. It's not about I prefer this or over this. Now, you can develop skills in one or the other. You can have stronger quantitative skills. You can have stronger qualitative skills. But you don't use that to make a decision on which one to use and employ to conduct a research study. If you need to conduct a research study on something that we don't have a lot of knowledge on, we're not high level on that high level continuum of knowledge, which could be an example might be individuals who have been freed from cults. Or maybe the individuals, we have several examples now where young girls who were kidnapped many years ago and were held captive for years upon years upon years, and even had children by their captors and then were rescued 18, 20 years later. We don't have a lot of high-level knowledge of the outcomes for those individuals. Those are pretty rare incidences. That means that we would take a qualitative approach. We would delve into what is that experience like for those young ladies who have lived in that situation and then emerged from that situation. Qualitatively, what does that look like? What does that mean? As we can gather more information, we can begin to see the patterns. From those patterns, we can begin to derive some definitions that can be applied across that population. So it's a progressive thing. On the flip side of that, we know we have a high level of knowledge that suffering child abuse during certain developmental stages will result in relationship problems as adults. So going in and really sitting down with an adult and saying, tell me about your childhood. We already have a high level of knowledge of that, so we can do some quantitative studies on that. It doesn't mean we disregard the individual's experience, but it means if we're conducting research, then we actually have some operational definitions of what child abuse is. We have some operational definitions of some outcomes, some mental health outcomes for adults who've experienced child abuse. So our knowledge is higher level, so therefore we would be more likely to conduct a quantitative study in that area to expand our knowledge. Again, you don't have to have memorized, and you don't have to be able to spout off the different research designs, one pre-test, post-test, one-shot case study, all of that, but you need to have a good understanding of the different levels, the pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, and the true experimental. Because when we're reading studies, when we're being a consumer of the research, we need to know at what level those data were collected and interpreted, so then we know how to apply it. If we're looking at a pre-experimental study, we're looking at something along the lines of a survey, a cross-sectional questionnaire, a one-shot case study where we just gather information from a group of individuals and it's just descriptive. We just describe that population. We can't make inferences about that population and what we've learned to any other setting or to outside of this sample. Quasi-experimental designs actually use components of a true experimental group design. These are group designs, pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, true experimental, they're group designs. And a quasi-experimental design uses the same components that a true experimental design does, except that they do not have random assignment to the groups. The key for a true experimental design, in addition to some of the other qualifiers in terms of manipulation of the independent variable and everything, is random assignment to the groups. What's important about knowing these different levels, unless you're doing a random controlled trial, which is considered a true experimental group, you cannot make clear statements about cause and effect. We can't say our intervention reduced depression with 100% certainty unless we have created a high-level, true experimental, random controlled trial group design. So the others are very informative. They give us information, but they don't give us that level of cause and effect. Oftentimes what we do as consumers of research is we read a pre-experimental design, we read a quasi-experimental design, and we take the findings as if they're the gold standard. As if, oh my gosh, they found this is true, this is what it's going to be, this applies to everybody, but it doesn't. So that's what understanding those different types is important. Why it's important to understand that, because we need to understand how each of those can contribute to our knowledge base, and more importantly, how they cannot. Because we don't want to create programs, we don't want to provide interventions that we don't have good research, and I mean good research being high-level rigorous research to demonstrate that there's positive outcomes for our clients versus negative outcomes. So you can look these up at any point in time. You can Google them. The Google family, they know everything. You can determine the different components, what they control for in terms of their internal validity, their external validity. So those things, memorizing those things aren't as important as being able to, number one, know how to look for them. Know that if I'm looking at a pre-experimental design, it's going to be able to tell me something different than a quasi, and it's going to be limited in what it can tell me. So understanding those concepts, the very details of it, you can look up. That's information you can seek as long as you have developed those skills for finding information that you need. And you don't have to memorize all of this stuff, but you need to have that good high-level understanding of the differences of it. And the dreaded statistical categories. This is what everybody dreads, but I can promise you when we delve down into some actual statistics and we start running them, it's not near as scary as it seems. Computer programs do the math for you. When I did statistics 150 years ago, we actually had to do the actual mathematical formulas and plug in everything. You don't have to do that anymore. We don't teach it that way in our program. We teach it to be applicable in practice. So you don't have to dread it. What you need to understand is the difference between descriptive and inferential. Again, those overarching categories with descriptive, those are statistical tests that all we can do is run descriptive information about our sample population. It's very important that we do that on all of our data, but we can't make any judgments beyond that. When we get into inferential statistics, we can start looking at relationships between variables. And when we get into those higher level group models, we can take inferential statistics and we can determine if we can apply the finding from our research to a population beyond just our sample. And that's kind of what we want to be able to do eventually. So if we have a small sample and we learn that providing this intervention will result in this outcome, we want to be able to say that if you take that intervention and you provide it to a broader sample, you're going to get the same outcome with this likelihood, with this 99% likelihood. That's what we eventually want to get to, but that's the difference between descriptive and inferential statistics. So you just need to have a basic understanding of that, again, moving forward. So those are the main concepts, the overarching concepts that we delved into this semester. You got into the nitty-gritty of the details of a lot of those, but those are the main things I want you to take with you. And because importantly, you can always look back in your book. You can always Google the answers. You can always look that up. If you have a strong understanding of those overarching concepts, you can get into the details and know how to apply them. So that's a brief wrap up for this semester. Y'all have done amazing. You've got it behind you, and you're going to start getting ready for next semester. So I hope you have a great break. And if you have any questions, just let me know.